Hey guys, tonight we're brewing something quiet. A story not of queens or wars, but of teacups and shop fronts. We're spending a day with a Victorian tea merchant, someone who handled history's most delicate leaves and knew that survival, in London, required equal parts flavor, charm, and coal dust. And you probably won't survive this. Not because it's dangerous, but because you'll be asleep long before the ledger opens. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins in stillness, before the first cart rattles over the cobbles, before boots scrape the stoop or shutters creak open. The city holds its breath somewhere near Fleet Street, down a narrow row of terraced buildings where gaslight halos flicker weakly in the fog. The day begins with the soft clink of a key turning in a door. You're standing just behind him now, our merchant, wool coat, scarf wound twice against the bite in the air, and gloves already powdered with soot from the night's ashfall. He eases open the door of number 73, Tilbridge Lane, and steps inside, locking it behind him out of habit. Not fear, just habit. The shop is cold, the air thick with the scents of dried leaves and old pine. He doesn't speak, just moves quietly, first to the back of the counter, then to the small stove tucked under a shelf near the register. He strikes a match. The hiss is sharp. The gaslight flares, warming the corners of the room in soft amber. You can see the outlines of the scales now, the white porcelain cups stacked with delicate imbalance, the brass tin marked Keeman with its lid half off from yesterday's rush. He crosses to the front window and unlatches the interior shutters. With a low creak, they fold outward, revealing the soot-blurred glass. The street outside is still empty, just a few boot marks in last night's damp ash. No one's selling paper yet, no horses, just fog and the sound of distant bell metal. He lifts the window panel and wedges it open slightly from the inside, enough to let in air, but not enough to risk the wind toppling anything delicate. Then he turns back to the room. The first real task is sweeping. Coal dust doesn't knock politely. It slips under every doorframe, settles in every gap between the planks. And so, the broom comes out, a quiet rasp across the floorboards, a soft gathering of particles that glint faintly when caught by lamplight. The leaves, too, scattered from a rushed scooping, or a curious customer who wanted just one more whiff of something smoky and strong. It's not glamorous, but it's precise. There's no muttering, no rushing, just a morning rhythm. Sweep, shake, empty, repeat, and then the weights come out. He lifts the velvet-lined tray from beneath the counter. Inside, the brass weights, some as heavy as 8 ounces, others no larger than a thimble, rest in their places like instruments in a string quartet. He lines them up beside the counter's scale, checks the balance arm, adjusts the pan with one practiced nudge, even now, before any customer has arrived. He knows someone will ask for just a quarter more, and he wants the scale ready. A few bricks of compressed tea are already resting on the slicing board. They came from a wholesale delivery last week, dense, dark, and wrapped in waxed cloth. He unfolds one gently, as though it were sleeping. The scent escapes like a secret, not fresh, not sharp, just quietly complex, earth and smoke and something almost floral beneath. He doesn't slice it yet. That comes later, but he lays the knife beside it, as if setting a place. You can hear the faintest tick of a clock now, one that runs a little slow, not by accident, but by intention. He winds it back slightly each Monday. Something about controlling the pace of the week. Something about staying in front of time instead of behind it. The shop is ready, or close enough. No sign hangs outside to shout about bargains. No chalkboard declares a sale, just a small placard pressed into the window's corner that reads blends adjusted upon request. A promise, not a boast. He pours water into the kettle and places it on the stove. It won't whistle for a while, but when it does, it will be for him, not a customer. For now, he waits, standing behind the counter, hands folded lightly, eyes watching the door. The sun has not yet broken through the London fog, but the shop is open. The day has begun, and you're here with him. The sun is still somewhere behind the buildings, behind the fog, behind the layers of smoke and damp that coat the sky like an extra ceiling. But inside the shop, time is already ticking, gently, deliberately, the way it always does around balance scales. The merchant doesn't start with sales. He starts with weighing, not for money, not yet, for readiness. He opens the wooden case behind the counter, the one with the small brass latch and velvet lining. Inside, wrapped in a strip of cotton cloth, are his scales, two shallow pans hung from a pivoting brass arm, worn slightly where his thumb always rests to steady it. Not an elaborate instrument, not ostentatious, but precise, dependable, the kind of tool that listens before it speaks. Each morning begins the same with calibration. He sets the first weight, a round, quarter-ounce disc, into the left pan, in the right, a tin scoop of dried leaves, loose and dark and slightly crumbling at the edges. He adds, removes, adds again, not watching the dial, but the arms themselves, waiting for that moment where movement stops, where the scale stills, where the balance feels earned. It's a ritual, as much about reassurance as measurement. Some teas arrive in bricks, hard-packed and needing to be cut into slivers with a narrow blade. Others come in sacks, stitched shut with twine, smelling of sea voyage and canvas. The ones from Ceylon tend to clump slightly in damp weather. The ones from Yunnan crumble too quickly if left near the stove. He knows them all by sound as much as sight. When he tips leaves into a tin, the Ceylon rustles sharply. The Keeman is quieter, a papery whisper. Assam drops like tiny pebbles. These textures matter, not just for brewing, but for price, for blend, for mood. You watch as he portions out one tin after another. Some he marks for household orders. Mrs. Ellery's Tuesday blend with extra Darjeeling. Some are left open on the counter, ready for sampling. Each receives a label, hand-lettered, tied with twine, and sometimes dabbed with a drop of sealing wax if it's for delivery. There's something ceremonial about the way he handles the tools, the spoon, the scale, the blade, as though each morning he must convince the tea to cooperate again, to sit quietly in its box and wait to be measured, scooped, and eventually poured into hot porcelain by someone he'll never meet. From a high shelf, he retrieves a heavy tin marked Simply house. No region, no varietal. Just a mixture of black teas blended in the back room, a balance of smoky depth and soft sweetness that changes slightly each month, depending on what arrives from the docks. He pours a measured portion into a wooden bowl lined with parchment. Then he lifts the bowl and gently tilts it side to side, letting the leaves move like water, listening for friction, watching the flow. This part is as much instinct as method. If the leaves slide unevenly, he adds a spoonful of something lighter, perhaps a touch of floral Darjeeling, or a fine shred of dried citrus peel if it clumps. He stirs, not with urgency, with care, like someone smoothing a tablecloth at the end of a quiet evening. There's a small journal on the back counter, bound in leather, its corners soft from handling. He opens it, finds today's date, and notes down weights, quantities, and one or two stray thoughts. Earl Grey too sharp for rain, or Mrs. H asked after the smoked nilgiri again. These aren't notes for commerce, they're reminders of patterns, of preferences, of moods and weather and the way people change what they want with the seasons. No customers have arrived yet, but the shop already hums with preparation. Tins are stacked, scales are aligned, the floor has been swept twice, once for ash, once for thought, and now, as if on cue, the kettle behind him begins to sigh, not whistle, just a low, promising breath of steam. He doesn't rush. He turns, lifts it carefully, and pours the water into a small teapot already waiting on the sideboard. The leaves inside were measured in silence earlier, while the shop still held its morning hush. He sets the lid on the pot and walks to the front window. The fog is thinning, just slightly. The first bootsteps echo faintly beyond the glass, and somewhere down the street, a door creaks open, a bell rings, a newspaper lands with a damp slap against a doorstep. The city is waking up, and the tea is almost ready. The sound reaches the shop before the wagon does, a creaking axle, the dull thud of wood on stone, and the faint clatter of metal hooks against the side of a crate. The merchant doesn't flinch. He knows the rhythm. This is no customer. It's the delivery. He moves to the front of the store and pushes the door open. Outside, the fog is lifting in soft layers, like someone drawing gauze from the edges of a painting. The driver is already lowering the ramp, sleeves rolled up, breath bloomin' in the chill. There are 5 crates today, each one marked in black paint with a stencil W.T. and Sons, London, via Calcutta. The lettering is blurred at the edges, but legible. One corner of the first crate has been rubbed almost smooth by rope and salt air. A small patch of wax still clings to the lid's edge, once a seal, now a suggestion. The merchant nods a greeting. No words exchanged. Not yet. There's too much lifting to do. Inside, the crates are placed one by one in the blending room, stacked against the back wall. They're warm at the center, cool at the edges, not from weather, from travel, from time, from the hold of a ship, the jostling of wagons, the waiting in damp warehouses before finally arriving here. He pulls a long-handled pry bar from under the counter and runs his palm across the topmost lid. The wood is pine, not nailed, lashed and wax-sealed, like most of the better exporters use. He wedges the bar beneath the edge and slowly lifts. The lid gives with a sigh and a faint snap. Inside layers of packing straw, then a folded sheet of oilskin. then cloth. Everything smells faintly of spice and salt, though there's no spice inside, just the scent of long travel and distant humidity. He peels back the cloth. Tea, dark, curled, slightly crushed at the corners where it's pressed against the crate. He pinches a bit between thumb and forefinger, lifts it to his nose. Assam, unmistakably dense and malty, like toasted rye crust and burnt sugar, still slightly warm from being packed tight. He sets this aside. The next crate reads F. Jean, Xiamen. This one is smaller, square, nailed shut. He takes more care here. The importer is known for precision, but not for generosity. Inside, nestled in linen and rice paper, are 2 bricks of compressed tea, smaller than his palm, dark as ink, pu-erh most likely, fermented and pressed. Not everyone understands the flavor, but those who do always come back for it. There's a quiet satisfaction in these moments, not excitement, just confirmation that things still move. That distance doesn't always mean disappearance. That a plant grown on a hill half a world away can end up here, under gaslight, in the quiet of a London shop. He lays the bricks on the blending table and moves to the 3rd crate. This one bears the faded mark of Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, though no one calls it that yet. Inside, long, wiry leaves, slightly brittle, smelling of wood smoke and orange peel. They shimmer faintly in the light, their surfaces dusted with a silvery down. Not common. He'll blend these with care, something soft, maybe floral, something meant for delicate porcelain cups. And as he works, he keeps mental tally how much is usable now, how much must rest, how much will be held for winter blends. Not all tea is ready when it arrives. Some needs time to breathe. Some needs to forget the journey before it remembers the flavor. A few tins are emptied. Others are filled. The new crates are not discarded, but repurposed. Some cut down for kindling. Others stored for deliveries, still smelling of salt and resin long after they've been rebranded for London errands. Only now does the merchant glance at the delivery note, printed in thick, uneven ink, a list of weights, a scribble from the ship's agent, a single underlined word, dry. He nods. That's the best he can hope for. Not fragrant, not fresh, just dry. A word that means everything is still intact, outside. The driver whistles softly, waiting for a signature. The merchant scrawls his name, hands over the sheet, and watches the cart rattle off toward the docks. He closes the door behind him. The room smells different now, fuller, more complex, and in the center of it all, the blending table waits, quiet, broad, a little stained, ready. The back room isn't large, but it holds more than the shop itself, not in space, but in possibility. It's here that the teas stop being regions and start becoming stories, mixtures balanced not by geography, but by instinct. The merchant hangs his coat on a hook near the stove and slips into his blending apron, the front stained faintly with dust and oil from years of careful stirring. On the table, a fresh sheet of parchment, a narrow spoon, a flat brush, and 2 shallow wooden bowls. One already holds a scoop of the new Ceylon, the other waits. Blending isn't scientific, not entirely. There are no formulas here, just ratios, remembered from mornings past. A spoonful of something strong, a pinch of something light, a dusting of dried citrus peel, a whisper of rose petals, pressed between fingers to release just enough oil. He leans in close and inhales. then again, not to enjoy, to listen. Some merchants boast of secret blends, family recipes locked in safes. He doesn't. His are not secrets, they're conversations between leaves, between seasons, between the weather and what a tired clerk might need after walking through coal fog. He picks up a tin marked Hill Rain, a blend he last adjusted in October. He tips out a small portion into his palm. The scent is softer than he remembers, less smoke, more wood. He adds a spoon of cumin to compensate. No notes are written, just a tilt of the head, a flicker in the eyes. Enough. The tea is mixed gently with a wide, flat brush, stroked, not stirred. Leaves shouldn't break. Each one must hold its shape. He moves the mixture back and forth across the board, watching how it settles, how it catches light. The colors tell him if it's balanced. Too dark, too dull, too wild. Some customers prefer complexity. Others want simplicity dressed as elegance. But no one says it that way. They say something for a gray morning, or a blend my aunt might like. And he translates from a jar. He pulls a small curl of dried orange peel, slices it thinner, and tucks it into the blend. Not for taste, at least. Not directly. For aroma. For presence. So that when the tin is opened, the air itself feels lifted. There's a sample tray on the side, an old, cracked piece of marble where he sets test scoops. He adds a spoonful of the blend and pours just enough hot water to steep. No measuring, just memory, as it brews. He cleans the board with the brush, pushing remnants to one side, where they'll be used for floor samples or taken home at week's end. Nothing is wasted. Even old blends have purpose. Even faded leaves can steep a second time if treated kindly. He pours the tea into a tasting cup, white porcelain, rim chipped. He doesn't sit. He stands, sips, frowns, adjusts. A little more of the Darjeeling this time, a little less. Assam. The correction is slight. It's the improvement. Immediate. He makes no announcement, no smile of triumph. Just lifts the tin and pours the final blend inside, sealing it with a soft cloth lid and a thin strip of waxed paper. He presses it down. The scent escapes for half a second before disappearing. And while he blends, he listens, not to music, not to people, to the water, to the scratch of brush on wood, to the shift in scent as leaves open and close. There's a quiet thought he sometimes repeats to himself when blending, a phrase picked up long ago from an old importer. The leaf remembers the mountain, meaning, perhaps, that each tea carries something of where it came from, that you don't control it, you guide it, encourage it, ask it what it wants to become. He places the tin on the front shelf. The label is handwritten, the wax seal pressed carefully. Tomorrow, someone will open it. Tomorrow, someone will taste a hill they've never seen. The front bell chimes softly, just once, and the merchant looks up. Not startled, but gently roused. It's not loud. It's not sharp. Just a sound that folds into the day like another thread in the weave. The door opens inward with a practiced hand, and in steps the first regular. A woman in a wool coat with a bit of dampness clinging to the hem. A netted veil folded up above her brow, and a paper list pulled from a pocket before she even speaks. "Good morning," she says softly, not quite meeting his eyes. "Mrs. Carraway's blend, if you please. She wants less of the smoky one this week." He nods once, already reaching beneath the counter. a tin marked not with a name, but with a faint blue chalk line across the lid. Her sister's preference, apparently, for something gentler. He measures it quietly while she tucks her gloves into her sleeve and eyes the tins behind him. There's comfort in this dance. Neither of them rush. Behind her, a second figure arrives, umbrella tucked under arm, boots still speckled from the puddles outside. This one's louder, not in speech, but in presence. A clerk from one of the nearby counting houses, with an appetite for strong tea and stronger opinions. Something brisk today. Mr. Layton, he says, flipping open a notepad without looking up. The Sloan blend gave me indigestion. The merchant says nothing, just raises an eyebrow faintly, half concern, half acknowledgement, and turns toward the Keeman tin. He adds a pinch of Assam for depth and a breath of Ceylon for finish. It's not a remedy, but it's a start, soon. The front of the shop is alive, not crowded, never that, but animated, in the way that slow places become when they are known well by their visitors. A housemaid collecting tins for a household near Bedford Square. A young woman who smells faintly of ink and asks too many questions about oolong. A retired colonel who never buys anything, only critiques what's on offer. The merchant answers them all the same way, quietly, respectfully, and always with a certain measured distance. Not cold, not warm, just attentive, as though each blend he sells might be a letter someone's too shy to write, as though taste is only half the transaction. There's no till bell, just a drawer that opens with a wooden creak, revealing neat rows of coins sorted by denomination. Receipts are written in pencil on thick paper, the kind that creases instead of folding. Names aren't needed, except for deliveries. And through it all, the conversations flow, not just about tea. One woman wonders aloud whether the ship from Canton has arrived, her tone casual but her glance sharp. Another mentions that the weather in Assam has been too wet. According to her brother's letter, someone asks if the green tea shipment expected last week is delayed due to fog on the Thames, or something worse. The merchant doesn't answer right away. He pours instead, a small cup from the sample pot behind the counter. "Try this first," he says, and they do. It's a kind of diplomacy, this exchange, a language with no verbs, just flavor and nods and half questions tucked inside the names of gardens and hills. One woman leans forward and says, low enough that only the merchant hears, "The Post said there's been unrest in Fujian again." Her eyes flick to the doorway. Will it affect the spring shipment? He replies only, "Not yet." And that's enough. These aren't political discussions. They're commercial whispers, folded into polite tones, tea gossip, quiet suspense. You watch it all from the corner near the scale, where a warm stream of air slips out from behind the stove. The merchant's hands never stop moving, measuring, folding paper, tying twine, scribing a date on a label, always gentle, always sure. No one stays long. That's part of the dance, too. The shop is meant to be visited, not lingered in. Comfort is fine, but it must never become idleness. By noon, the last of the morning regulars has come and gone. The bell hushes again. The merchant lifts the kettle, refills it. The shop, for a moment, returns to silence. The leaves have been chosen, the stories traded. The air smells faintly now of warmth and paper and the kind of satisfaction that only comes from remembering what someone liked before they asked for it. Outside, The street has begun to glow in its own peculiar way, not with sunlight, but with reflection. The shop windows across the road catch what little brightness filters through the fog, and for a few hours, each afternoon, even the coal-sooted bricks seem to soften. The merchant stands near his own window now, tin under one arm, a thin chamois cloth in hand. He's not polishing for vanity. He's preparing for display. A Victorian tea shop didn't survive on scent alone. It needed appearance, not opulence, but quiet, respectable beauty, a promise in glass, an argument made without words. He dusts the ledge carefully, brushing away yesterday's flakes of ash and this morning's stray flecks of packing straw. Then he reaches under the front counter and lifts a square of heavy linen, cream-colored and neatly folded. It's one of three he keeps for this purpose only, creased just so, with a single stitched corner to mark its top edge. He lays it across the window shelf, smooths the cloth flat with his palms, and adjusts the hem until it sits just short of the frame. The edge shouldn't touch the glass, not ever. Next comes the mirror, small, beveled, and slightly tarnished around the corners. He places it on its stand at a precise diagonal, angling it just enough to catch the light and cast it back into the room. It doesn't show much, just the glint of brass, the gold of a label, but that's enough. Reflection lends weight. It suggests more than it reveals. Now the tins, not too many, never clutter, each one selected for its color, its shape, or its label. A square tin of Ceylon with a fine blue border. A round container with hand-inked calligraphy from a shipment 5 years past, empty now, but still elegant. A stack of waxed packets tied with red string, their tops folded like envelopes. No sign, no prices, just presents. He steps back, studies the composition, adjusts the corner of the cloth by half an inch, replaces one tin with another slightly taller. Then, finally, nods. The passers-by won't know what changed, but some will slow. That's all he wants. Outside, a young boy pulls at his mother's sleeve and points toward the window. She glances once, then hurries on, but the merchant catches her hesitation. The mirror did its work. The corner of red string caught her eye. She may return. The art of the Victorian window display wasn't about flash. It was about tone. No shouted banners, no bold letters, just confidence folded into cloth and shape. A message to say we are careful here. We are quiet. We are worth entering. Some merchants believed in drama, stacked towers of tea bricks, gilded elephant figurines, fans opened wide across the glass. Not here. This shop believes in balance. Even the dust seems curated. He returns inside and replaces the cloth in its drawer. Tomorrow, a different arrangement. Perhaps the pewter jar. Perhaps a dried camellia bloom. The window must change, but slowly, like the seasons, like the leaves. Historians debate how elaborate these displays really were. Some say shop windows were purely utilitarian until the great plate glass expansions of the 1860s. Others argue the ritual began far earlier, especially in shops that catered to households with a taste for exoticism and domestic routine alike. The evidence is hard to pin down faded sketches, invoices for linen, a stray entry in a merchant's notebook reading simply, window, new cloth ordered. But what remains undisputed is how the visual rhythm of a shop shaped the tone of its transactions. It wasn't just about what you sold. It was about what people saw before they crossed the threshold. Back inside, the merchant lights a small cone of sandalwood and sets it in the corner. The scent will mingle with the tea, settle into the cloth, and drift gently out when the door next opens. He wipes his hands on his apron, straightens the tin on the shelf, and returns to the blending table. Outside, the window holds steady. Inside, the air shifts, and in the mirror, for just a moment, you see the room the way a passerby would, soft, intentional, waiting. There's a lull now, a deep breath in the rhythm of the day. The merchant doesn't waste it. He steps into the little side office, not much more than a curtain and a narrow table wedged between the back wall and the storeroom. There's barely space to turn around, but here is where the shop's real memory lives, not in tins, in paper. He lights a lamp, one with a glass chimney smudged with thumbprints and soot, and it casts a warm oval of light across the cluttered surface. A small stack of letters, tied with string, a bound ledger, its spine cracked and pages thick with use, and to the left, a blotter already dusted with the first flecks of this morning's ink. Correspondence first. He unties the stack, smoothed the topmost sheet. It's from a broker in Liverpool, dated last Thursday, with 3 lines in dense, slanted script. Assam shipments slowed. Steamer held in Calcutta. Expect increase in price. He reads it once, then once again, before folding it neatly and tucking it into the inside cover of the ledger. No alarm, no sigh. Just a quiet note in the margin. Possible shortage. Raise blend reserve. The second letter is less direct. A cousin of a supplier, writing not with figures, but with weather apparently. Heavy rain in Darjeeling has washed out one of the older hillsides. Nothing too dramatic, but the plantations are slow to respond. He mentions it in passing, as if chatting in a market, but to the merchant, it's a sign. The teas will taste different next year, maybe brighter, maybe thinner, so he'll adjust. He writes a note beneath the house blend recipe, hold back on Darjeeling until May. That's enough. No more detail needed. The leaves will tell him more than the paper ever could. Next comes the ledger itself. The entries are not rushed. They are spaced evenly, inked in a firm, clear hand, quantities in one column, costs in another, deliveries in red, beneath one order. He's scribbled a name Mrs. Halbram wants double strength. Another reads, Ellery prefers no lid on tin, claims it dulls aroma. These are not transactions. These are relationships. There's no adding machine, no calculator. It's just a heavy block of wood with 4 worn-down pencils and a box of sealing wax beside it. Occasionally, a bead of wax marks a particularly large order, not for security, for respect. And then he reaches for the smallest drawer in the desk. Inside, tucked between receipt stubs and scraps of unused label paper, is a thin booklet with clipped newspaper items, weather reports, import announcements, shipping notices from distant ports. One clipping reads, Harvest delayed in Zhejiang. Another new warehouse opens near Port of London, specializing in dry goods. He doesn't read them for news. He reads them for context, for the mood of the trade. Because while tea is leaves, it is also stories. And while stories shift, the shop must remain steady. At the very bottom of the stack, he finds an old note written by a fellow merchant. If the scent is strange but the weight is right, check the sails, not the leaf. It makes him smile. No one writes like that anymore. And just as the light begins to fade, a new scent arrives, not in the letters, but in the room itself. Smoke, coal smoke, creeping in from a chimney somewhere nearby. The city outside is stoking up for the evening, and the fog is thickening again. He'll need to close the back vent soon. He dusts off his hands, wipes the nib of his pen, and closes the ledger. The curtain sways behind him as he stands, revealing the shop again. Tins quiet, lights warm, front window glowing gently. Before he steps away, he reaches for one last item, a sealed envelope addressed in careful script. It's not for reading, it's for mailing. An order to a supplier in Bristol. Just 6 words: send best of lowland stock, nothing more. The merchant already knows the rest. He presses the wax seal against it, holds it a moment longer than necessary, then places it in the outgoing box near the door. The kettle hisses behind the curtain, and another day of silent decisions folds itself into the shape of a single, remembered blend. He doesn't notice the time, not really, not in numbers, but the shift in light through the window, the faint ache in his back, and the soft groan of the floorboards beneath his feet tell him the moment has arrived. Midday. It's not marked by bells or clocks or a break in the foot traffic, just a gentle slackening of pace, like the shop itself is exhaling. He turns down the stove and steps behind the counter, reaching for a small, square tin tucked beneath the lowest shelf. It bears no label, just a smudge where a sticker used to be, and the faint scent of something floral and woodsy. This is his tea, not for sale, not for sampling, just a quiet indulgence, measured with no scale, steeped with no ceremony. The teapot already waits, its lid cracked, its spout chipped, its handle wrapped in a loop of linen from some long-forgotten parcel. He doesn't mind. The cup, too, is a survivor white porcelain with a faint blue band, the rim uneven from where it was dropped years ago, and mended with clear glue. He lifts the kettle slowly. The handle warms against his palm. The water breathes, not bubbles. That's enough. Too hot and the leaves turn bitter. Too cool and they sulk. He pours. The scent rises, soft, layered, a little smoky, a little sweet, perhaps a whisper of rose petal, or maybe it's the sandalwood cone still smoldering in the corner. He never quite remembers what he blended into this tin. He changes it every month, but the result is always the same familiarity. He doesn't sit at the table. He never does. Instead, he leans gently against the counter's edge, one hand wrapped around the warm belly of the cup, the other resting on the shop ledger, not working, not thinking, just pausing. A cart rattles past the window. Someone calls out across the street. Rain begins, soft at first, then louder, like 1,000 brushes sweeping cobblestones at once. He listens and doesn't move. This is the only moment of the day that belongs entirely to him. No blends, no weighing, no notes, just one sip at a time. In the middle of a room he's spent years learning to read by scent and silence. It's not just tea, of course. It's a boundary between morning trade and afternoon rush, between listening and speaking, between what he gives and what he keeps. He sips again, and the warmth creeps into his chest, not with force, but with the steady confidence of a fire that doesn't need to be watched. Outside, The umbrellas begin to appear, black, brown, gray, a row of wool coats pulled close. There will be customers again soon. Rain drives them in faster than cold or sun, but not just yet. The shop holds its stillness a few minutes longer. He finishes the cup and sets it on the shelf behind the counter. There's no ceremony to it, no sigh, no stretch of the arms, just a small nod to the stove, and then a return to the steady world of leaf and measure and glass. One tin is straightened, a label smoothed, the next moment waits politely at the door. You can feel it before you hear it, the shift in the air, the slight pressure of presence outside the door. It's not the weather, it's the rivals. Every shopkeeper in this part of London knows the moment when another merchant passes too slowly, or a new sign appears in a once empty window. The streets are polite, but they are not innocent. Across Tilbridge Lane, just beyond the grocer and the hat maker, a fresh display has appeared. A cream-colored curtain drawn back, a gleam of polished tin, and behind the glass, a familiar face, Mr. Howarth, of Harbury and Sons, straightening a row of sample jars with the same cautious care as our merchant did just hours ago. They nod when they see each other, a brief tilt of the chin, neither smiles, neither frowns, just acknowledgement. The way candle flames nod to one another from across a long table. The merchant doesn't go outside, but he stands closer to the window now, not watching, just standing. The etiquette between shops like these is clear, though never spoken aloud. You don't undercut openly. You don't poach clients in the street. And above all, you do not mimic blends. To do so is to admit that you have none of your own. But there are small, permissible games. Mr. Howarth's shop, for instance, often adjusts its pricing by halfpennies, a quiet temptation. And last month, he began offering tea in glass jars with handwritten notes, rainy afternoon, dowager's cup, not naming regions, naming moods. Clever. The merchant respects the move. It's charming. It won't last. He returns to his counter and adjusts a tin of his own, not to compete, just to clarify. His blends do not flirt, they serve. A customer enters, one of the few who shops at both establishments. You know the type, shifting loyalties, always trying something new. She picks up a tin, sniffs it, and says, "I do like Mr. Howarth's lap song, but it goes a bit sharp by day 3. The merchant says nothing. She waits. Still nothing. He simply offers her a fresh sample. No name, no pitch, just the quiet weight of quality. She leaves with 2 tins, both sealed in wax, one labeled plainly, the other unlabeled. This is how the game is played, sometimes. They meet at the docks when shipments arrive. There, all bets are suspended. They nod, occasionally speak, share glances over crates, muted dismay over cracked seals, mutual interest in rainfall patterns. No bragging, just business. There's a kind of fraternity in rivalry, an understanding that you survive together, even as you compete. The merchant recalls once seeing Howarth sheltering a damp crate with his own coat during a downpour. The crate was meant for this shop, not his. Nothing was said. But later that month, one of Howarth's orders arrived light, and a sample tin went missing from this shop's front shelf, only to be returned the next morning with a note not our flavor. He smiles at the memory, just a little, outside. The lamps begin to warm again as afternoon dips toward evening. The fog thickens, not white, but yellow-gray, tinged by soot and wood smoke, the kind that dims all windows equally, no matter how well polished. And across the lane, the rival's sign sways gently in the breeze. The merchant turns from the window. He's not worried. His blends speak in depth, not volume. His prices do not shout. His tins do not wear ribbons. He does not need novelty to hold attention, only trust. And tomorrow, when another passerby pauses, they won't know why they stepped inside, only that they meant to, and that it felt like the right place to stop. The bell above the door rings in two short bursts, quick, deliberate. The merchant recognizes the sound even before he looks up. It's Mr. Featherston, steward to one of the larger homes near Lincoln's Inn. Tailored coat, gloves still damp from the drizzle, a letter in one hand, and a tin tucked beneath the other arm, wrapped in paper that's already begun to fray. He doesn't waste time. Lady Havisham requests a refill, same blend as before, but, he adds, lowering his voice, she prefers it sealed with red wax this time, not green. The merchant nods once and gestures toward the back table. This part of the day belongs to preparation, not the broad. Dusty scoops of the morning, not the casual packages tied in brown twine. This is for clients who expect careful hands, quiet wrapping, and a seal that looks as expensive as it smells. He lifts the tin with both palms, treating it as though it might speak. The label is already printed, letterpress on thick cream stock. The edges soft from embossing. It says simply, "Special Preparation," and bears no signature. The blend has already been weighed. He measured it before midday, knowing this order would come. A base of Assam, sharp and warming, softened with a pinch of Yunnan and something secret, a leaf so delicate he keeps it stored in a handkerchief inside a porcelain dish. No more than a few grams, enough to linger. The tea is poured into the tin through a paper funnel, not a scoop, and so it lands evenly, without bruising the leaves. Then comes the paper, thick, lightly perfumed, folded over the top like wrapping a letter, and pressed flat with the heel of his hand. He selects a wax stick from the drawer, red, this time, and lights a small taper. The wax pools quickly, but he doesn't rush. He waits until it thickens, then presses the shop's seal, a stylized sprig of Camellia sinensis, surrounded by a circle of laurel. It sets in seconds. He turns the tin once, inspecting, perfect, as he folds the wrapping and ties the cord. His hands move with the assurance of someone who has done this hundreds of times, but never carelessly. Each knot matters. Each fold faces outward. Nothing must be rushed, but neither should it feel precious. There's something oddly calming about these deliveries. Unlike the bustle of the morning customers or the tentative questions of the samplers, the private clients never explain their preferences. They don't ask for novelty. They ask for continuity. And continuity is something this shop does well. Once, Lady Haversham's steward brought back a tin with a faint wrinkle in the seal. The merchant apologized, not in words, but in gesture. The next delivery arrived in a box lined with linen, tied with a ribbon that matched the house crest. No further comment was made. But since then, orders have doubled. Not every delivery goes to a grand home. Some are for clubs, for reading rooms, for quiet ladies in walk-up flats with no titles but excellent taste. But the method is the same. Each tin is not just tea, it is presence. There's scholarly debate about how much attention Victorian merchants truly gave to packaging. Some historians suggest it was mostly utilitarian until the rise of print advertising. Others believe this kind of ceremony, private, deliberate, was part of the merchant class long before it was ever marketed. The surviving wrappers and seals in archival collections suggest an unspoken prestige economy, where the appearance of care mattered as much as the product itself. Back in the shop, the tin is now ready. Mr. Featherstone inspects it once, then tucks it back under his arm with a soft grunt of satisfaction. By Friday, as usual, he murmurs, turning toward the door. The merchant nods again. That's all that's needed. As the bell rings again and the door eases shut, the merchant clears the counter, wipes the table, and returns the red wax to its place in the drawer. Outside, the street is darker now, tinged with oil lamp glow and the first hints of evening fog. Inside, the tin on the table is gone, but the scent lingers, not just of tea, of intention. The door creaks again, this time slower, heavier. There's no bell, only the hush of damp wool and boots leaving faint arcs of soot on the floor. The merchant glances up and sees the narrow shoulders and stern chin of a man who never lingers and never jokes. The tax inspector. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't need to. He's been here before, twice this quarter, and always at the worst possible hour. His coat drips faintly onto the mat. One glove is already removed. The other holds a folded slip of paper with far too little writing on it. The merchant says nothing, but nods once and moves to the side of the counter. This is how it always begins. The inspector unfolds the paper, scans the tins along the shelf, then steps forward with slow deliberation, not pointing, just gesturing faintly, like a conductor selecting a note in an unseen score. That one, he says, tapping a jar marked Imperial Union, and that, Assam Standard, and a random. Random means unpredictable, but he always chooses a third one with the wax still warm. The merchant lifts each tin, carries it behind the counter, and opens them in silence. He removes the lids, sets them aside, and waits. The inspector reaches into his bag and pulls out a small brass scoop, not unlike the one used for customers, but marked with a tiny government crest. He weighs a portion from each tin, places the leaves into waxed paper pouches, seals them with a twist of string, and tucks them back into the bag. For testing, he says, verification of declared varietal. The merchant does not sigh, does not shift, just writes the names and quantities into a small receipt book in a hand so tidy it could be printed. The inspector walks slowly to the back shelf, eyeing the scale, calibrated yes, weights in the drawer, marked and matched, a pause. Let's see the sample drawer. The merchant steps to the side and opens the long, shallow drawer beneath the counter. Inside, slips of dried tea in paper envelopes, each with a handwritten date and blend code. They're aligned neatly, tied together by month. He lifts one bundle, unties it with deliberate care, and offers it. The inspector sifts through, lips pressed, pausing once at a line that reads Cs03, Haversham Alt. He glances at the merchant. The merchant returns his gaze with an expression that offers nothing. It's legal to custom blend. It's legal not to label. But sometimes The line between honesty and habit feels thinner than the wax seals themselves. There are rumors, of course, that some merchants cut their blends with dried broom or dock leaves, that shipments get watered before packing, that ash finds its way into the bottom of low-grade crates. But not here, not in this room. The inspector finishes, replaces the bundle, and closes the drawer without comment. And then, oddly, he lifts a tin from the front display, not one of the taxed ones, just a sample, unlabeled, resting on folded linen. He opens it, smells the contents, and sets it back down gently. This one's new. Yes, the merchant replies. Another pause. A longer one. Should be listed next month. It will be. And with that, the inspector folds the slip of paper, tucks it into his pocket, and leaves. No receipt, no signature, no farewell. Just the echo of boots and the faint scent of rain. Wax and ink. The merchant closes the drawer, replaces the tins, and returns to the counter. He checks the scale, not because he doubts it, but because ritual matters. The brass arm still balances. The needle still quivers between tick marks. All is as it should be. There's a part of him, quiet, but steady, that appreciates this inspection, not the disruption, not the tone, but the clarity. The reminder that the shop is not just a space of flavor and feeling. It's a business, with boundaries and ledgers and the occasional knock at the door that has nothing to do with taste. He returns the sample drawer to its place, resets the tins, and wipes the counter once with a soft cloth. The rain outside continues, and inside. The shop breathes again. The rain has grown impatient. It no longer taps politely at the windows. It flings itself sideways, gusting in bursts that rattle the panes and leave streaks across the glass. Outside, umbrellas bloom like dark flowers, low and angled, as if their bearers are being pressed forward by the storm. And then it begins the late rush. The bell rings 3 times in 10 minutes. First, a man with spectacles fogged nearly opaque, asking for something quick and warming. Then 2 sisters, wrapped in identical shawls, speaking over one another about Aunt Clara's blend, though neither remembers what was in it. And behind them, a boy no older than 12, dripping from collar to bootlace, clutching a note from his employer that simply reads, 4 ounces, mild. The merchant doesn't speak much. He gestures, measures, packages. His movements are more fluid now, less measured, as if the storm has smoothed the creases from his thoughts. A puddle begins to form just inside the door. He places a folded cloth on the floor without looking. One of the sisters sneezes. He quietly sets a small tin of ginger root behind the counter. She doesn't notice, but she might tomorrow. The scent of wet wool, coal smoke, and steeping tea turns the shop into a kind of shelter. Customers lean a little closer to the stove. Elbows brush near the sample tins. Voices grow softer, pulled inward by the weather. Not everyone is polite. A man in a cravat insists his order was underweighed last week. He gestures vaguely toward the ledger. The merchant does not blink. He lifts the scale, resets it, and remeasures the blend. It's exact. The man grunts and buys it anyway. No apology, just coin and silence. Then comes the baker's wife, always last, always breathless, 2 packets. She gasps, shaking her umbrella over the stoop. 1 for me, 1 for Father Darren. You remember what he likes. I don't. She laughs. The merchant smiles, just barely, but the right blend is already in his hand. Rain beats louder. For a moment, the tin ceiling above the back room thrum like a drum. The noise deepens the room, folds it inward. Even the mirror in the window seems to blur. He lights a second lamp, not for vision, for tone. Some merchants close early on days like this, some rush to finish. He does neither. The shop keeps its rhythm, even when the world outside becomes a smear of umbrellas and wheels and steam from horses passing under the gaslights. A girl with ink-stained fingers, likely from the printing house, asks for something that doesn't smell like my work. He hands her a blend with fennel and lemon peel. She breathes in, and for the first time all day, says nothing at all. There's debate among historians about how central tea shops really were to late-day traffic in working neighborhoods. Some claim they were end-of-day rituals for the middle class only. Others point to anecdotal records, a policeman who stopped by each Thursday for a single ounce of Earl Grey, a seamstress who paid in halfpence and buttons, a barrister who bought 3 blends but never brewed them, just liked how they looked on his shelf. But the shopkeeper sees none of this as sociology. It's habit, it's presence, it's the strange democracy of rain. The bell rings again. A woman enters, drenched, her coat clinging to her knees. She shakes her head at the merchant's offer of a towel. I only came to stand out of the weather. He nods and says, "You're welcome." She doesn't buy anything. She just breathes in, once, deeply, then nods her thanks and leaves. And that too is part of the trade. The shop doesn't empty, it settles. The air stills. The puddle on the floor shrinks. The umbrella rack fills. And outside, the rain begins to slow, not stop, just soften. When the rush fades, it doesn't leave with a crash. It slips away, like steam curling from a kettle spout, long after the heat is gone. The merchant doesn't call it closing time. He never has. He just watches the light shift, the way it always does when the final hour begins. The gas lamps outside have turned from halo to haze. The reflection in the window no longer shows the world, only the shop, and so begins the closing ritual. He moves first to the sample tins, returning lids, straightening labels. Each one is wiped with a soft cloth, not for polish, but to remove the prints, not because anyone would see, but because tomorrow deserves a clean beginning. The parchment under the scales is folded and tucked away. The balance weights returned to their box. The scoop washed and set to dry in its little wooden stand. The ledgers remain open on the side table, but the pencil is capped. No more notes tonight. Any final thoughts can wait until morning, when the ink is sharper and the air is quieter. From under the counter, he takes a small broom, not the morning one for soot and ash, but the finer bristled one for collecting what the day has shed. He begins near the back wall, moving slowly, not looking down. He knows the pattern by heart. Dried leaves near the blending board, a fragment of orange peel where a sample jar tipped too far, a thread of red wax, a single, perfect clove. He does not speak. He does not hum. He sweeps it all into a shallow pan lined with wax paper. Later, this will be emptied into the tin-marked floor blend, an old joke, never sold, sometimes steeped by the merchant himself on cold days. The floorboards creak beneath his steps, but the sound feels gentle now, more like breathing than strain. He draws the shutters closed across the front windows, each one latching with a soft click. From outside, the shop becomes faceless, just another darkened square in a street of flickering lamps and muddy boots. But inside, it remains itself. The front door is left open for one last moment. The air outside has changed. It smells of wet stone and coal smoke, and something faintly sweet from the bakery up the lane. The merchant steps out with a small pail of waste paper and tea dust, tipping it into the ash bin beside the steps. He lingers a second longer than usual. A cart rattles past. A dog trots by, nose low to the ground. Across the street, Howarth's window is already dark. Back inside, he lowers the door latch with one steady press and slides the wooden bar across. Not a lock, just a promise. And finally, he picks up a tin from the back shelf. Not the house blend, not something rare, just a plain tin, scratched and warm in the hand. Inside, a handful of the week's quietest leaves, bits that broke off from scoops or drifted loose in jars. They're not beautiful, but they've waited. He opens the tin, tips a small scoop into the old teapot by the stove, and pours in water just hot enough to coax a scent without scalding. The room fills with one last exhale of perfume malt and dried fruit, a hint of mint, a curl of something like tobacco. He leans on the counter, cup in hand, and sips. Outside, the street is mostly empty now, only the soft swish of a passing coat, only the dim shuffle of someone heading home too late or too early. And the tea, what's left in the leaves, isn't strong anymore, but it's enough, not because of what it gives, because of what it reminds. The door is locked, the lamps are low, the tins are still, and now the merchant slips into his coat, not the one for shopkeeping, but the longer one with the deep inside pocket where his gloves always wait. One turned inside out. He wraps a scarf around his throat, not tightly, just enough to blur the boundary between warmth and breath, and steps out into the early evening fog. The air hits him like cloth, not wet, not dry, not cold, but pressing gently on all sides. It smells of soot and damp horse leather and distant chimney smoke. He turns left, toward the river, not for any reason. That's simply the way his feet go when the day is finished. The city is never quiet, not truly, but at this hour it hums at a lower frequency. The clatter of carts is slower. The conversations behind windows are muffled. Lamps glow not to light the way, but to announce the shape of buildings. Everything flickers. His boots strike the stone rhythmically. No need to hurry. He knows every crack in this street, every loose paving tile, every shop that will be gone by next year. He passes a tobacconist where the scent of pipe leaf wafts thick and sweet, a bookseller locking up, a man sweeping sugar dust off the bakery steps, here and there. A lantern in a window draws the eye, golden, low, a silent invitation to nowhere in particular. A dog trots across the road, pausing near a drain before vanishing into the mist. As he walks, the merchant's mind doesn't tally the day's sales or review the ledger's entries. He doesn't think about the weight of shipments or the state of the roof. He simply remembers faces, comments, gestures, the way Mrs. Halbram smiled when she recognized the jasmine in her tin, the boy from the press room who didn't speak but lingered just long enough, The sound of the seal cracking under Featherstone's careful thumb. Small things, real things. He passes a narrow alleyway where two gas lamps flicker at opposite ends. The light between them is fractured, interrupted by fog and shadow, and rain made soft by distance. He pauses beneath one and looks up. Moths gather. Always. Even in this city. Even in soot. Some historians say Victorian shopkeepers rarely socialized, that once their shutters closed, they became invisible. Others argue the opposite, that they were fixtures of their communities, participants in every street fair and seasonal supper. The truth, likely, is both. The merchant doesn't need to be seen to feel known. He turns another corner. Now he's walking beside the Thames. The air smells different here. Brinier, older, a kind of sleeping iron. The water isn't visible, but its sound is constant gentle lapping against the docks, the occasional clunk of wood against mooring. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. A barge horn sounds in the distance, low, mournful, echoing off the buildings like a memory of a ship that passed years ago. And then, without realizing, he slows. His feet draw him back toward home. He doesn't live above the shop. He never has. He keeps the two spaces separate, one for exchange, the other for recollection. His rooms are small, plain, but the kettle waits. He climbs the steps two at a time, not out of youth, but because that's the only way he's ever climbed them. At the landing, he removes his coat, hangs it on a peg, and steps inside without lighting the lamp. The fire still holds a little heat. The window pane is cold beneath his hand. The fog outside is now complete. He sets the kettle on the stove and waits. The kettle does not whistle. It exhales, a soft, steady breath of steam that curls toward the low ceiling, catching the faint flicker of the fire's last ember. No rush, no urgency, and just warmth becoming sound. The merchant moves slowly now. There's no performance left, no scale, no counter, no customer, only this last moment when the day folds in on itself and even the shadows stop trying to stretch. He pours the water into a wide porcelain cup, not his shop cup, not the chipped one. This one lives only here, in this quiet room above the street. The rim is smooth, the glaze worn soft by years of late-night brewing. There's already a spoonful of tea waiting inside, a bit from the end of the tin, a blend he doesn't sell. It's not named, it doesn't need to be. He doesn't sit, not yet. He just holds the cup in both hands, letting the warmth move through him. The room doesn't creak, it breathes. The window fogs faintly at the corners. And now, we wind down. The flavors unfold slowly, not bright, not sharp, and just familiar. Earth and smoke, a whisper of something sweet, citrus peel, perhaps. Or maybe that's memory, not taste, outside. The city quiets itself by degrees. A cart clatters once, far off. A door closes with a soft thud. Somewhere, a dog barks, not out of warning, just out of routine. The fog has thickened to the point where the streetlight's glow is no longer a light at all, just a presence. And here, in this room, the merchant lets go. No blends to adjust, no wax to warm, no ledger to correct. Only the tea, only the cup, only the stillness. He sits now, not in a chair meant for guests or posture, but in the one by the window, the one with the cushion that's just a little too flat. He doesn't look out. There's nothing to see and everything to feel. This is the moment he never speaks of, never lists. It doesn't go in the ledger. It isn't priced, it's just his, a space between effort and sleep, a kind of quiet only earned by repetition. You're there too, not intruding, just resting, because you've walked this day with him through scales and fog, blends and bells, soot and steam. You've watched the morning arrive through a streaked window and the evening fade without asking permission. And now you sit, too, beside the fire that is no longer heat, but only glow. Let your breath slow, let the silence widen. The cup is half empty now, but there's no need to refill it. That was never the point. All around you, the world pauses, not stops, not ends, just rests. The tins are sealed, the ledgers are closed, the rain has forgotten to fall, and the tea still warm, still enough, still here. You don't have to remember every blend. You don't have to weigh every detail. Tonight, the shop sleeps, and so can you.